What happens when one of Hollywood's legendary tough guys sits down for what everyone thinks will be a regular breakfast chat, only to find out the interviewer has something completely different in mind? You're about to find out. Trust me, this is one daytime TV moment that took everyone by surprise. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts below, because this story is a real roller coaster from start to finish. It was supposed to be just a straightforward promo spot. Clint Eastwood, the man who's been a symbol of effortless cool in Hollywood for over 60 years, agreed to come on Good Morning America to discuss his latest film project. Even at 94, Eastwood commands a lot of respect in the industry, so his presence on any talk show was a big deal. The network was thrilled to have landed the interview, knowing he rarely appeared on TV these days. George Stephanopoulos was prepared with the talking points. The conversation was meant to be about Eastwood's new film, his thoughts on his career, and maybe a casual chat about his directing style. Pretty standard stuff for a morning interview. The production team even put together a reel of clips from Eastwood's most famous films to air during the segment. But from the moment he walked onto the stage, something felt off. The iconic star entered with his trademark slow, deliberate gait, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room. He took his place in the guest chair opposite Stephanopoulos, adjusting his coat with the same careful precision he applied to everything he did. "Good morning, Clint," Stephanopoulos started with his typical polished TV smile. "Thanks for being here today." "Morning," Eastwood replied in that signature gravelly voice, looking calm but watchful. The first few minutes went well enough. Stephanopoulos asked about the new project, and Eastwood gave his usual measured answers. He spoke about the film with genuine enthusiasm, sharing details about the story and the talented cast he'd worked with. His insights were engaging, just what the morning audience expected from a cinematic icon. But then Stephanopoulos began steering the conversation in an unexpected direction. "Clint, you've been in this business for quite a while," Stephanopoulos noted, his tone subtly shifting. "You've seen Hollywood change a lot over the years. Some say the industry has become more socially conscious and aware of inclusivity and representation. What do you think about those changes?" Eastwood's eyes seemed to narrow just a bit. This wasn't the question he was expecting, and it definitely wasn't part of the planned discussion. "Well, George," Eastwood replied carefully, "I think a great story is a great story, no matter who tells it or who stars in it. I've always believed in hiring the best people for the job. But come on, you have to admit the industry had to change." Stephanopoulos kept pushing, pointing out that there were some serious issues that needed fixing. The vibe in the studio felt a bit tense all of a sudden. Eastwood's jaw tightened just a bit, a subtle sign that fans of his would catch as a warning. "I think," he said, channeling that classic edge we know from his Western films, "great filmmaking has always been about telling real stories with authentic characters. When politics and agendas get involved, it just complicates things." Stephanopoulos leaned in closer, sensing a chance to dig deeper. "But isn't it political to ignore these issues, to pretend that representation doesn't matter?" "I'm not pretending anything," Eastwood shot back, his voice steady but with an underlying firmness. "What I'm saying is when you make films just to check boxes instead of telling stories, you end up with propaganda, not art." The studio audience started to squirm a bit. This was a far cry from the lighthearted morning show they were used to. Camera operators exchanged worried looks, torn between continuing the broadcast or cutting to a break. "That's an interesting point of view," Stephanopoulos replied, though it sounded like he wasn't entirely convinced. "Some might say that's the perspective of someone who's never had to deal with representation." Eastwood's eyes narrowed. "Privilege, really? I grew up during the Depression. I dug pools and worked in a steel mill before I ever got on a movie set. Everything I accomplished came from hard work, not because of some idea of what I was owed." "But you have to admit the industry was different back then," Stephanopoulos pressed, appearing oblivious to the tension. "Not everyone had the same opportunities." "Sure, it was tough on everyone," Eastwood replied firmly. "I dealt with years of rejection, took small roles, worked for peanuts. Nobody handed me anything because of my race or gender. I made it because I refused to quit when others did." The atmosphere in the studio thickened, almost palpable. The producers in the control room were frantically deciding whether to intervene or let this play out. This could either turn into a disaster or be the most talked about segment in a long time. "I think you're dodging the real issue," Stephanopoulos said, his polished facade starting to crack a bit. "The system was rigged." "The system was harsh," Eastwood corrected him. "There's a big difference between harsh and unfair. Life isn't supposed to be easy. Films shouldn't be therapy where everyone gets a free pass." Stephanopoulos' face flushed with frustration. "So you really don't think there were barriers that kept talented people from getting chances?" "Obstacles exist for everyone," Eastwood stated calmly. "The real question is whether you waste your energy complaining about them or look for ways to push ahead." The interview was drifting away from the usual upbeat vibe of morning TV. What started as a promotional chat was turning into something much more candid and personal. Stephanopoulos wasn't backing down. In fact, Eastwood's calm responses seemed to give him more confidence, as if he sensed a weakness in the star's refusal to engage with his challenging questions. "But Clint, you must admit that your generation of filmmakers had opportunities that others didn't," Stephanopoulos insisted, his tone becoming more intense. Eastwood's expression shifted to one of steely determination. "My generation? You mean the ones who fought in World War II? The ones who helped build this country into what it is today? That generation? I mean the generation that ran Hollywood for decades while pushing others aside," Stephanopoulos countered, dropping any pretense of neutrality. The studio went quiet, the tension palpable as even the crew stopped to watch this rare confrontation. Eastwood leaned back slowly, sizing up Stephanopoulos with the same fierce focus he once used against outlaws in his Western films. "George," Eastwood said, his voice unsettlingly gentle, "I think you've got me confused with someone else. I've never shut anyone out. I've hired people, actors and crew, based solely on their talent. That's all there is to it." "That's easy to say now," Stephanopoulos shot back, his confidence growing. "But the numbers tell a different story. How many of your films featured diverse casts? How many female directors did you support?" Eastwood tightened his grip on the arms of his chair. "The numbers? Let me enlighten you on the real story, son. I made films that dealt with important issues. I portrayed real people facing real challenges. I didn't hire based on some fabricated checklist made by people who've never stepped foot on a set." "So, you're saying that diversity wasn't a priority for you?" Stephanopoulos asked, clearly trying to make a point. "What I'm saying is that storytelling has always been my top priority," Eastwood replied, his tone starting to rise for the first time. "It always has been and always will be. If you want to talk about diversity, I've made films about soldiers, police officers, cowboys, boxers, just regular people trying to get by. I've shown America as it really is, with all its imperfections. But you did that through a very narrow perspective," Stephanopoulos shot back. "The perspective of white, male, conservative America." That seemed to push Eastwood over the edge. His usual calm demeanor finally cracked. "Conservative America," he exclaimed, his voice charged with his trademark intensity. "You think Unforgiven was conservative? You really believe Million Dollar Baby was some right-wing fantasy? Clearly, you haven't seen my films. Those are exceptions," Stephanopoulos dismissed his claims. "Your entire body of work promotes a specific viewpoint." "My viewpoint?" Eastwood leaned in closer, his eyes fiery. "My viewpoint is that people need to take ownership of their choices, strive hard for their dreams, and show respect to others. If that's seen as controversial, then maybe you're the one with the problem." Meanwhile, the producers in the control room were in a frenzy. This was meant to be a touching feature on a Hollywood legend, not a political battleground. Still, Stephanopoulos pressed on. "Don't you think your films just reinforce stereotypes about masculinity and the idea that violence is the answer to problems?" He kept at it. Eastwood shot up from his chair, the noise echoing like a gunshot in the otherwise quiet studio. "Stereotypes," he said, looming over the seated host. "You want to discuss stereotypes? Let's talk about the one that claims anyone who doesn't share your political views is automatically a bigot or a chauvinist, or whatever label you want to throw at them." Stephanopoulos looked a bit taken aback by Eastwood's powerful presence but pressed on. "I'm just asking fair questions about your work and its influence." "No, you're not," Eastwood shot back, his voice now heavy with the weight of his Hollywood legacy. "You're trying to trap me on live TV because you think it'll bump your ratings. You brought me here under false pretenses to discuss my new movie, and instead, you're attempting to judge me for making films that people love." "I think you're being too defensive," Stephanopoulos said, trying to regain control. "Defensive?" Eastwood's laugh was devoid of humor. "George, I've been in this industry longer than you've been alive. I've been criticized by professionals, by experts, by people who truly understand what it takes to make a film. But I've never had someone sit across from me and call me a bad person just because my movies don't fit their political narrative." The host squirmed a bit. "That's not my aim." "That's exactly what you're doing," Eastwood countered. "And you're not even doing it well. Want to have a political debate? Sure. But don't hide behind journalism and pretend this is about my career. You've got an agenda and thought you could use me to sharpen it up." Stephanopoulos' face was now noticeably flushed. "I'm aiming for a meaningful discussion about important issues." "No, you're just trying to create a moment," Eastwood said, his voice cutting through the studio like a knife. "You're hoping I'll say something you can edit and spin to fit whatever narrative you're pushing this week. But I'm not falling for it." The tension was thick in the air. Audience members exchanged nervous glances, unsure if they should be witnessing this confrontation. Camera operators kept rolling, some hovering over their controls, ready to cut the shot. Stephanopoulos, sounding feeble, said, "I think you're misinterpreting my intentions." Eastwood shot back, "Your motives are pretty obvious. You brought me on hoping to paint me as the bad guy in your little moral story. Well done, George. You got your showdown. Hope it was worth it. Stephanopoulos looked shaken, but he couldn't let his pride slip. You know what, Clint, he said, his polished demeanor breaking down. Maybe the problem is that you can't handle scrutiny about your legacy. Maybe you're just not used to someone pushing back against your outdated views. Those words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in an old Western standoff. Eastwood looked at him for a long, hard moment, his face unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was chillingly calm. Outdated views, he echoed, taking his time. Let me explain what I think about outdated views. I believe in treating everyone with respect, no matter who they are. I believe in earning respect through actions, not just expecting it because of your status. I focus on telling stories that resonate with real people living real lives. If that's outdated, then I'm proud to wear that label. But you have to admit, the world has moved past the simplistic morals in your films, Stephanopoulos continued, completely missing the mark. Today's viewers want more complexity, more depth. Eastwood's laugh cut through the air, sharp and biting. Depth? You want to teach me about depth? I made a movie about a prejudiced old man who learns to rise above his biases. I made a movie about a female boxer fighting against a world that doubted her. I've tackled the consequences of violence, the burdens of leadership, the sacrifice of redemption. But that doesn't seem to matter to you because I didn't check the right political boxes. Those themes were always in the background, Stephanopoulos argued. Your movies primarily glorify a kind of masculine heroism that a lot of people find concerning these days. Concerning? Eastwood shot back, shaking his head. There's that word again. Everything seems to be an issue for you guys, doesn't it? Standing up for what's right is an issue. Owning your actions is an issue. Protecting those you care about is an issue. The studio was completely silent now, except for the background hum of the lights and cameras. Even the producers had stopped trying to step in, maybe realizing this tension had taken on a life of its own. I'm not saying those values are bad, Stephanopoulos replied, though his tone gave a different impression. I'm saying your films present them in a way that sidelines other perspectives. Other perspectives? Eastwood's voice rose again. George, I've been making movies for over 50 years. I've worked with actors from all walks of life. I've told stories about all kinds of people, but apparently, that doesn't count because I didn't make enough grand gestures or pat myself on the back for my woke casting decisions. But you have to see how your influence shaped Hollywood in ways that weren't always helpful, the host pressed, not backing down. That seemed to be the last straw. Eastwood's usually unshakable calm finally cracked. My influence, he roared, his voice booming through the studio. You want to talk about my influence? I helped create an entire genre of film. I showed that movies could be both entertaining and meaningful. I proved audiences wanted to see stories about real people facing real moral challenges. And sure, I made money doing it, because that's how this business works. Stephanopoulos tried to interrupt, but Eastwood wouldn't let up. But beyond that, he continued, his voice thick with anger and frustration, I've employed thousands over the years, actors, writers, directors, crew members, artists. I've given opportunities to those who earned them with their talent and hard work. I built jobs, careers, a body of work that still resonates decades on. I understand that, Stephanopoulos said, his voice faltering. No, you don't understand, Eastwood cut him off. You don't get what it takes to make a film, the risks, the stakes every single time you press record. You sit behind a desk and lecture about representation, diversity, and justice. But you've never put your own money on the line for a story. You've never had to convince investors to back your vision. You've never had to tell someone their position is gone because a project didn't work out. You could tell the host was really uneasy, but he wasn't about to back down. That's the kind of thinking that's held Hollywood back, he shot back, sounding desperate. This obsession with making money instead of sticking to values. Eastwood just stared at him, clearly not buying it. Profit over values? Come on, George. Without profit, there's no cinema. If movies don't succeed, there are no jobs, no stories, nothing. You can hold on to all the values you want, but if nobody's watching, you might as well be talking to yourself. But art should be more than just about money, Stephanopoulos pushed back. Art? Eastwood scoffed, his voice heavy with contempt. Are you really gonna lecture me on art? I've been making true art longer than you've been around. Art that resonates with people, that means something. Not that pretentious, award-hungry junk that puts audiences to sleep. Things had really escalated now. Eastwood loomed over Stephanopoulos, his larger-than-life presence overshadowing everything in the studio. The host looked small, his polished image cracking under the weight of Eastwood's passionate outburst. Listen, Stephanopoulos tried again, aiming to regain control. I think we're getting off track. I just want to have a genuine conversation about your career and its impact on culture. Genuine? Eastwood's laugh was sharp. There's nothing genuine about this setup. You brought me here with a hidden agenda just to score some political points. When I wouldn't play along, you turned it into a personal attack. That's not journalism, George. That's just activism wearing a reporter's hat. I really don't appreciate that accusation, Stephanopoulos shot back, his voice getting louder in defense. Feel however you want, but it's still the truth, Eastwood countered. You've already made up your mind about me and everything I represent. This interview was just a setup to make me confirm your biases. The tension in the studio was electric. It was clear that things were about to get intense. I think you're being unfair, Stephanopoulos said, though his voice faltered a bit. Eastwood regarded him with what looked like pity. Unfair? You know what's unfair, George? Bringing someone on your show to discuss their work and then spending the entire time tearing down their life's accomplishments. What's unfair is using your platform for politics instead of actually doing your job as a journalist. He paused, his icy glare locked on Stephanopoulos. But you know what? I'm over this charade. I came here to talk about movies, the art of storytelling, something I truly love. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks they know better than someone with 50 years of experience. With that, Eastwood bent down to deliberately unclasp his microphone. Hold on, Stephanopoulos said, a hint of panic creeping in as he realized his opportunity was slipping away. We're not finished yet. Eastwood looked back up at him, his expression firm. Oh, we are finished. I don't need to sit here and deal with your disrespect for me, my work, or the people I've collaborated with. I might have wrapped my last film, George, but I still know how to walk off a set when someone's wasting my time. You can't just walk out, Stephanopoulos protested. This is live TV. Watch me, Eastwood replied, letting the microphone drop onto the chair with a loud clatter that echoed through the stunned studio. He turned to face the cameras, his strong presence grabbing the attention of everyone watching. Folks, he began, speaking to the audience with the seriousness of his many iconic roles. I'm sorry you had to witness this. I came here to discuss filmmaking and tell stories that matter. Instead, I got lectured by someone who believes that years of hard work mean nothing if you don't conform to the right political beliefs. Stephanopoulos attempted to speak up, but Eastwood shot him a look that silenced him. I've spent my career entertaining people, crafting stories that resonate and creating something lasting and meaningful. If that's not enough for some, that's their problem, not mine. And with that, the 94-year-old legend turned and walked off the set, his gait dignified and measured, just as it had always been. The studio sat in shocked silence as his footsteps faded away completely. Stephanopoulos found himself alone at the desk, face flushed and composure shattered. He looked around anxiously, as if expecting someone to help him, but the crew and producers met his gaze with looks of disbelief and disdain. The cameras captured the awkward moment as he struggled to find the right words to piece together the mess, but nothing could take away from what had just happened. In his attempt to undermine a Hollywood icon, George Stephanopoulos had ended up undermining himself. The most dramatic standoff in morning television history was done, and there was no doubt who came out on top. So, what do you think about Clint Eastwood's legendary exit from that disastrous Good Morning America interview? Was George Stephanopoulos asking for it by trying to catch the Hollywood star off guard? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below.